Punpun was a young boy, just like any other. He had a crush, he had friends, he had interests, and a dream. Life was simple, yet scary in a childish wonder kind of way. A scary you're willing to face. Life was so easy and joyous under the vast stars on that one night. A moment so short, yet so pivotal for all these kids, and especially little Punpun. But it was a moment that he could never return to. I tend to make claims like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever read, or oh, best show of the year, but when I say this, I mean this with every fiber in my body. Oyasumi Punpun is powerful. It's dreadful, it's beautiful, it's horrible, and it is damn incredible. Also, yes, the art is scarily realistic and fantastic, but this isn't really about that, so there you go, my standard art praise for the video. I'm assuming you're only stupid enough to be here if you've finished reading and are looking for some sense of purpose, and that's why I'm here. Before I get all into it, I'll get my feelings about this out there and clear. Punpun is unlike any piece of media I've ever experienced, and one of the most visceral and powerful. I won't say it's my favorite or anything, but from an objective standpoint, I can very clearly see the argument for this being one of the best mangas ever written easily. I was unable to reread the story for this video, as for the longest time, whenever I looked at any panel from the story, there formed a very large pit in my stomach. I often mention Evangelion as incredibly powerful and moving for what it has done for me, and yes, that story is insanely depressing, but it's completely different from Punpun. Punpun just hurts, not as some look at the flaws of humanity as a whole or some deep introspective, but just how much life can suck. A normal life. There's nothing bad or supernatural here. It's a guy who went through some bad shit, did some bad shit, and struggles to handle that. And it's uncomfortable how real and depressing it is. And I'm gonna tell you why, so you can suffer with me. The story of Punpun is about, well, a boy named Punpun. It follows him from early childhood all the way into his 20s, and is simply a telling of his life, following all of the important character-defining times he's been through. Throughout the story, you get segments where you follow other characters, usually those that are close to Punpun, going through their own struggles. The one consistent one you always go back to, besides Punpun's, is the story of Seki and Shimizu and the Pegasus Gang. I thought it was interesting how that story balanced out with the heavy main plot. However, I'm not here to talk about that today with the good vibrations and what all that means. Besides that, basically the entire story is just following Punpun as a person growing up, as well as a few others, so there isn't much more to this that I won't discuss when talking about the characters. The main reason I think Punpun is so good with the gut punches and feeling of dread is, as in any good story, how well written the characters are. But this isn't some shonen strong conviction well written. I'm talking about how every single character that is remotely important is written to feel like a real person, like someone you could just meet on the street today. They aren't perfect, just as I'm not, and just like you aren't. And it's almost scary how tangible everyone feels. Punpun himself is something else. He really feels like someone I've known for my entire life. When you go read this story, you follow him through all of his most defining stages in early life and can see exactly why he is the way he is in any aspect. He's such a sweet kid. I love his naivete and his quiet demeanor. It's really cute. I love his friend group and the comedy at the beginning of the story. But I think the saddest thing in that stretch of the story for me is seeing Punpun go from that shy kid to someone who simply shuts everyone out. Like, even when he's in middle school, he's already mostly there, being completely alone, slowly drifting from his friends, and just not knowing how to talk to people. The line between shy and shut-in is a thin one and easy to accidentally go over, and I resonate a lot with Punpun in this way. all the way up into his early adulthood, living alone. He's quiet and can barely talk to anyone. And I hate that for him. I'm not going to sit here and go one by one and list off all of the defining moments in Punpun's life, because that's just way too many, and also because I think they are better expressed when put through the eyes of those around him. Punpun's uncle, Yuuchi, is one of those characters I adore. I spent the entire early part of the story seeing him as the only good adult in the story, the only one who could really do any good for Punpun, and I liked his attitude. He's very no bullshit, and I love how much he cares for Punpun, even though he doesn't really show it. This is what I thought, until the story forced me to realize this wasn't the case. He wasn't a cool, awesome guy. He had bad tendencies. He hated himself. He's a very, very screwed up past, but he also isn't some monster. He feels genuine, deep regret to the point of suicidal thoughts. Even though he has a great chance with Midori, for example, he pushes her away and tries to kill himself over his regret. She, of course, stopped that from happening, which is why I loved Midori and how she seemed so stable and caring. But just as with Yuuchi, definitely worse this time, she screwed up. And this left such a sour taste in my mouth. It was deplorable what she did to Punpun, and how you can see that changed him for the worse. No matter what, I despise what she did to him, and it is a horrible, horrible thing. But the point of that, I don't think, was to hate her. I think it was to frame her as a human being who was in a really bad place. Does that excuse what she did? Absolutely not. She did something horrible and she can't be forgiven. However, it's important to not look at it as black and white, just as with everything. But at the end of the day, even though they both did horrible things in their own lives and to each other, Yuuchi and Midori had to move on. They had to keep moving. Yuuchi even cheated on Midori again, because if you have those tendencies, you won't just magically remove them. It takes time, and the story and Midori both understand that. These two aren't perfect people or perfect lovers, far from either. But they both had the strength to move on and accept, which made them incredibly real, and I appreciate them for what they represent in the story. And I will always break when I see Yuuchi towards the end, when his child is being born. All the tension and shit that's had to happen for him to get to this point is weirdly beautiful. Punpun's parents are complicated. I don't like his mother. I feel for her, I really do, but I don't like her. His father, I think, has great intentions, but failed to act on them in any meaningful way. I think the biggest thing, and the only thing I really want to talk about involving the entirety of these two and their stories, is this panel here. I loved this. It was so sweet and so sad when you look back on it. I know Punpun's dad does really care for Punpun, as showed, especially when Sachi visited him. Yes, he's got problems, but his heart is there. Overall, I think they just both show different ways to fail your kid, just as they did to Punpun, and a lot of what they did and who they are appears through Punpun as the story goes on. It's strange how you'd think they'd both be so integral to Punpun's upbringing, but there's not much to say on them, which I guess makes sense. Now, Aiko is so deeply upsetting. I read through it first, seeing her sweet and innocent, which swiftly changed to almost off-putting. She was toxic to Punpun and his health. I hated what she did to him, even though it really wasn't anything she did, but more so what Punpun did to himself because of her. This continued right up until the end bit, where slowly but surely I just realized what she really was. She was afraid and alone and weak. She was just the same as Punpun, and probably worse. That idea I had of her was just what made that whiplash so drastic when I realized I had done exactly what the story wanted me to. And by the time I realized all this, it was too late. It's so tragic because she is Punpun, and them two being that way simply destroyed them both. They were both so damaged, so them being together only brought them down. What Punpun really needed was someone to bring him out of his pit, not someone to make him feel comfortable in it. As long as the two of them were together, neither of them would have gotten any better. And it's so upsetting because despite everything, you can see how much they both deeply cared about the other and loved each other. Sachi is incredible. I love her character, and I love who she is and why for the sake of the story and Punpun. Just like everyone else, she is not perfect. I don't think I need to say that at this point in the video, but I adore the way she is. She's way too hard on herself and is a great representation and narrative on the issue of negative body image and personal insecurity. She realizes her flaw of not really knowing much about Punpun directly from him when she learns his life through his family and causes her to become better, which I think is very mature of her. I firmly believe she is what Punpun needs and always has needed, not even in a strictly romantic sense, although I do think that as well, but merely just as someone in Punpun's life. She pushes Punpun to do more, pushes him to talk, pushes him to do better, pushes him to try. Although she has her own personal issues, she cares about Punpun to the extent of searching for him for God knows how long, finding out about his life through his family and friends, to learn more about him, to help him when she finds him. I think having someone in your life to push you to be better is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. Being that person for the people around you is just as important, as it's really hard to do for yourself. You'll always set your expectations too high or too low and never feel accomplished. But from the outside, you can always see clear as day someone's full potential. And I think that's what Sachi saw in Punpun. I don't think she saw the real Punpun per se, but I think instead she saw what he could be. Hell, she didn't even see what he really wanted in life, but the fact she pushed him and cared to do what she did for him was incredible. Now, Seki and Shimizu have very little to do with the main story. They are very important for the Pegasus subplot, but I'd rather talk about them as friends. I think their friendship is so sweet and their growth is incredible. I don't honestly have much to say about them, but I wanted to mention them because I do genuinely love them and their story and relationship, and also to give us a little breather before we get back into the sucky stuff. Now let's wrap this part of the video by coming back to Punpun. Last we left off, he was living on his own and kept completely to himself. In this time in his life, I think Punpun meets a lot of great people. When he was at his lowest, he became good friends with his landlord, giving a career path and a goal in life while also befriending Sachi. I love this section as it gave Punpun a sense of home for the first time since he was a kid. Obviously there were ups and downs, but it was very sweet. Until he found Aiko. They both tested each other, and it came to be known that they were both lied and were in the same place in life. At this point, I still didn't like Aiko. She just seemed off. But when the two of them go to meet Aiko's mother, a lot of things became clear, and this string of events holds the most gut-wrenching and upsetting moment, I think, in the entire series. I know a lot of people can find some of the things Punpun has done as deplorable, but for this one, let me just set the scene for you. Imagine you saw someone you loved, deeply, truly loved, someone you have searched your entire life for, getting beaten to a pulp by their own mother, helpless on the ground, crying for help. They lie weak, screaming. You know their mother has caused them a life's worth of trauma and abuse. I'm not afraid to admit it. If I was Punpun, I'd boil over too. And I firmly think most of you would too. And I think that is what really makes this so uncomfortable. Because at this point in the manga, I saw every single thing that happened as a real event. Something that had happened to me almost. Whatever happened to Punpun, I felt, I empathized with. So when Punpun pushed himself on Aiko's mother and did what he did, it was so surreal. It made my stomach turn. I've seen people get their arms ripped off, blown in half, every which way in other manga and anime. But this right here was different. It was disturbing. After that, when Aiko and Punpun ran away together, every single chapter I felt dirty. Every time I flipped the page, I got more uncomfortable in my own skin and could do nothing but hope and pray that it would stop. The visceral and deep-cutting emotion and circumstances surrounding everything the two did was almost unbearable. Everything they did to each other, everything they said to each other, was so complicated and layered and god-awful. On the surface, it looks like two people who just straight up hate each other, but you know as the reader that it's out of love. It's twisted and disgusting. This was the first time I think we ever saw Punpun calm and confident in the way he held himself, and it was terrifying. But after everything, I still couldn't help but give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I had literally seen him grow up, and I knew he was still that smiling little kid who pissed himself all those years ago. And finally, Aiko told the truth after she couldn't take it anymore, and she killed herself. And I felt just as Punpun did. I felt empty. I could only imagine the grief he felt, carrying the one person he's ever truly loved on his back as she lay cold and bare. He had given up everything for her, to no exaggeration, and she was gone too. He had nothing. When he went to that abandoned miso factory and he tried to kill himself by stabbing his eye out, it really did seem like the end. But then Sachi found him. And after all that time, Sachi rescued him. This, I think, is my favorite scene. I think this really, truly ties everything up in a very weird way. I'm almost okay with Punpun at the end, as he finally has come back and continued his reason to live, and has a family, not a normal one, but it is one to them, and that's what matters. I'm sure you could tell, but throughout this video so far, I've been showing you a lot of examples of people doing bad things and trying to show you how that's okay. I want to ask you, if you had these experiences and were put in these situations, could you honestly say you'd do any better? Does that forgive some of these atrocious things? Absolutely not, but my point here, and what I feel a major point of the story was, is that we are imperfect, every single one of us. And it's because of those imperfections that we are human. The experiences and abuse these characters have been through, in some slight or different form, are things we've all been through. I think all of us have stories to tell, bad things that have happened, and that's okay. That's part of life. It shows what we've been through, makes us who we are. They don't break us down or destroy us, for we can and always should come back better, having learned from that experience. Another big part, I think, is how we can't let love destroy us or rule us. Love should be unconditional, whether it's romantic, platonic, parental, any of them. Love shouldn't harm, and if it does, it isn't meant to be, and that's okay. Love can be very blinding, while also feeling insanely safe. Love can be the only thing holding you down to reality, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's important to find more, to find your own purpose. Obviously, don't let me tell you how to love, but I do think it's important to learn from this, even though it is a very extreme case. But the biggest thing I took personally from this story was a desire to be better. Not like I'm gonna magically become some saint overnight, but in little ways. Over time, I want to work to be more understanding. I want to learn to be stronger. I want to be the best version of myself I can be. You aren't perfect. Don't think you're less than for not being, because no one is. When I say I want to do better, I don't have some unrealistic expectation to become perfect. Simply better than who I was yesterday, and the day before that. And I encourage you to do the same. Finally, I use anime and manga as an escape. I'm sure that comes as no surprise to any of you. I'm making YouTube videos about them, but as I'm sure many of you do too, this is a way for me to get away from the stupid and horrible shit happening around the world and in everyday life. So when that escape was something so uncomfortably real and dark, it hit me like a truck. But despite that, I still loved this story. I genuinely appreciate everything this story did for me. And although I doubt I will be rereading this anytime soon, I can confidently say that it was phenomenal. I think there are a couple ways to see the end of this story. You could easily see the end as Punpun just ending in failure once again. As from the eyes of Harumi, he couldn't even remember his childhood friend. But I don't see it that way. I see it as him finally breaking out of that one issue that caused all of those other issues. His self-destructive nature. Not like he magically got over it, but he found people that care about him, that can see that and prevent him from spiraling again. And I think that's what's important. That he has those people that can see the real him, finally. I don't think there's any real way to describe the ending. I don't think it's happy or sad. I think it just kind of exists. And they keep on living, just as in real life. Because nothing ever truly ends. Punpun broke out of his destructive cycle. And so can you. No matter how rough it seems right now, I get it, trust me. But believe in yourself. You can make it through this and get out becoming better. There's always light in the dark. You just have to keep going. Thank you guys for all the support lately. It's meant a lot. I promise I've been working hard to make more content for you guys, and I'll keep doing so. Make sure to stick around, subscribe. I love you guys, and I'll see you all next time.